Just show you the ODB2 connector. I think I showed you this before. Normally this goes under the dash, but it's here because the ECU is under this insulation blanket. The entire main wiring harness comes through here and goes under where the ECU is. This goes to the scan gauge 2. This ODB2 connector is full operational, meaning it's normal, just like any other modern car. This is a 2002. So we put that here. Moving over here towards where the main points of interest are. This is an electronic fuel pump relay. The signal that drives this comes from the ECU. The output is this main gray wire right here. This says fuel pump, this little label. This wire normally goes to the factory Silverado fuel pump in the tank. And this original gray wire is the OEM color. Now this one is crimped on with a coupler. I labeled it here to fuel pump. This is new wire. This is original from the car. This is to the fuel pump. And this is heavier gauge only because the standard gauge wire in the entire car as the add-on is 10 gauge. The original one is much smaller, but I oversized it just because flexible use, and then you get a little less voltage drop. This green wire is on the passenger side of the car, and it goes over to the other side, which we're going to go over and take a look right now. You ready? That add-on green wire is right here by the master cylinder for the brake. I put a label here called junction, fuel junction, and we just covered it. This green wire was the one that came from the other side. It's just a short jump that goes around the engine compartment. That is a crimp point here. There's a tiny sensor wire here. In this car, there's a total of 4 sensor wires. Actually, just 6. No, 5. 3 green. Let me look. Hang on. Yeah, sorry about that. 3 green ones and 2 red ones. This little sensor wire here turns an LED on in the dashboard to indicate when 12 volts is coming to this green wire from that relay we just saw. This is the crimp intersection. This red wire is labeled to pump. So this runs through the frame underneath all the way back to the tank for the in-tank fuel pump. The ground is picked off of the frame ground in the back, so there's no separate ground wire. This is just positive, so 12 volts. This little wire tells you while you're inside the car that you have 12 volts, not at the fuel pump, but at least at this final junction where the green wire and the red wire are crimped together. So normally this is all encased in this the inner duct, but I opened it up so we could take a look at it. Now let's go back over to the other side. Now continuing on, this fuse block terminal is the original that came with the car on the Silverado that's found on those types of cars. The first one fuse is going to be the ignition on fuse from your key switch, and from the original ignition on from the car it is wired to this blue wire here, and we've labeled it ignition key on. 12 volts will come through here traveling in this direction, and that blue wire goes into this fuse block, and it's fuse protected is it's this green one right here. And so in order to turn the car on, or at least tell the computer that your key is in the on state, 12 volts comes through here from the original OEM key switch. There's a junction underneath by the foot pedal, of course. Powers up this blue wire, runs into this fuse block. From the fuse block, it goes through the wiring harness into the ECU. Tells the computer that we're in the run or the on state. Let's see. We've got the fuel pump there. And this green one is from the battery area, main power. We'll go over and take a look at that right now. Okay. Moving right along. From the computer, we have a few small wires. And painless wiring also has the same thing. So there's a check engine light. This comes from the ECU, which is back over here. So this turns on the light, positive, going that way, and is currently tied to the temp switch, temp light bulb in the original Pontiac dashboard. So this goes that way, and if there's a malfunction light indicator, which is like your check engine light, from the ECU, it goes that way. The next one from the ECU is tachometer. I don't have this in use. This white wire ends up in the bottom where the steering column is, and is rolled up, and it says tach under there. The other wire, this one's important. This is purple wire, and this is labeled torque. Sorry, hang on a second. Let's get this thing here. It's labeled torque converter signal, and again, that's from the ECU, goes in this direction, and follow this. This goes basically into the dash, into the cab, and this one is connected to the dual switch for the brake. So when you step on the brake, this tells the ECU to disengage the lockup torque converter. Otherwise you have a hard time stopping. So this is an important wire. The switch underneath the where the brake pedal is a dual type. So in other words, there's one for the light, and then there's one for this particular switch. I'm going to leave these exposed. Normally it is all contained in this, and so these are also wrapped up, but I'm going to leave it open so when you come and take a look, you'll be able to see it. Now let's go over here to the other side. We'll start with the ground. This main ground, the big one, double lock, goes to the engine block, just like any other car. This heavier gauge, which is 8 gauge, is tied to this ground bolt right here. Grounds the frame of the car better than this came out of the factory. All the negatives center or home in on this point here. The positives coming off of here, you got the main large cable, which is this one here. This cable runs all the way down to the starter, and we have a label here called starter. This is a new piece of wire. This is actually welding wire, so it's nice and flexible and heat resistant and all that. It goes all the way down into the starter. This red wire, this 8 gauge coming off the terminal, goes to this terminal block. This is probably from a Ford or American car, and under here is where all the positive sources that need to be provided, 12 volts, comes off of here. Give you an example. This one is powering up the radiator main fan. There's a protection fuse right here labeled. That goes into this first relay here. This relay, if you notice, there's fan negative. That comes from the ECU. This wire, this purple with a white stripe, comes from the computer and says, hey, the engine is getting too warm. Turn the radiator fan on. Output is right here. And that goes ultimately to the fan power input. The other fan radiator, this is rad fan. You'll notice that this is telling it that there's another radiator fan. This one comes from the air conditioning unit. So when the air conditioning calls for the fan, it'll trip this relay and it powers up this cable ultimately. Notice that there's a junction here where the bottom wire is the output from this relay and this red wire is the output from this relay. This is for engine cooling, controlled by the computer. This is for engine cooling, but for the air conditioning unit. Two separate relays. There is a tiny sense wire, which I'm looking for. Let's see here. Here it is. This little sense wire is very similar to the green sense wire for the fuel pump. Just different color. This sense wire and that sense wire here detects that there is positive voltage on this one, which positive power goes this way, down this cable, through where this cable I'm pinching, ultimately this one goes to the fan, which is right here. Get a shot down here, point down. See those two wires right there? One is ground, always, and the other one is the positive. And that positive wire goes underneath, around the battery, around the fender, and then up to this red wire right here. And that powers up the fan. When that fan comes on, because this wire set is energized, this sense wire turns on an LED in the car. This skinnier wire for the air conditioning is the control. So the air conditioning unit says, I'm going to turn the compressor on. It turns this relay on, regardless of whether this relay from the computer is turning the fan on. This will turn that, power it up, energize, and then provide electric power for the fan. Let's see. Rolling. Okay, continuing on the main power junction. So this one went to the radiator system. This is coming from the battery. This is the biggest wire. This blue one next, if you trace this out, ends up right into this little junction right here. This relay is called HL, headlight. So one of the headlights is powered by this relay. Originally, when the car came out of factory, there is no relays for the headlight. It's all controlled by the main switch in the dashboard, and then that wires down to the high-low beam foot pedal switch, and then it powers up the both headlights. I didn't like that because when I was a kid, anyway, it just is poor design. So I added one headlight so it's relay driven, and that would be the driver's side headlight is driven by this relay assembly. The passenger side is driven by the original setup. So in other words, comes through the fuse box that's on the firewall, kick inside, goes to the headlight on-off switch, runs down to the foot pedal high-low beam, and then it powers up the passenger side headlight. This one is for the left side. The lights on this car is very bright for a couple of reasons. One is I'm using modern extra vision Sylvanias. The other one is that I have really good ground, really good positive, so we have full 12 volts. This is the aftermarket headlight that relay powers up. It's from Monument Auto. Okay, let's go back over here. Okay, coming from the positive, this is the headlight for the passenger side. The next wire of importance is this one here. This one says AC 12 volt. This is a 30 amp fuse, and this main wiring here goes all the way back through this wire into the compartment, runs the vintage chair AC unit. So dedicated. We're using this. Why we use this? Because the car originally did not have AC. Did not want to tax the original fuse block. Okay, so that's the AC one. This one here was to protect the radiator fan. Okay, the next one over here, this wire right here is the ACC power fuse. accessory power fuse. What that runs is the car's radios and whatever else, cigarette lighter, non-essential. If this fuse is out, the car works just fine, just no radio. Okay, the next one over is going to be engine main power. Biggest red wire, main engine PWR. And it's always hot, of course. All these are always hot. I got another label here just for because you know, it's foreign to you. This is the main wire. Without this wire, you have no ignition, no fuel pump. You don't have anything. None of the modern electronics will work. This drives that. This ultimately also powers up part of the computer. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay. Next one, just to kind of emphasize this one a little bit. Everything's encased, so it is a little harder to see. But this is our junction wire, fuse. Power comes through this little short on this side, runs through this red wire, then goes into the inside of the car. This is for the accessories. Along this, I labeled it spare cables. In here, there are 2 additional 10 gauge wires for future use. You could use it for positive, use it for negative, as long as you label it. I left it here. That way when you run all these wires, you run it one time, get it over with. So that's under here. I'll enclose all this later. Next and most important, let's see, is the illumination okay there? Okay, let's see. Let's go for the next part of this. This is the continuation from the engine trouble indicator, MIL. Let's see, what do they call that? Something, malfunction indicator light. This wire is from the passenger side, and it is one of those thin ones that I'll show you. We'll go back and look. That is the one that the ECU turns on when there's a trouble, you know, bad sensor or something like that. This is the original alternator connector for the original alternator of the car. I'm utilizing the gen light to turn on when this thing is on. It's very useful. You know, I didn't want to alter the original wiring. This bundle here is the original wire harness of the car. This is all it was. So it comes up to here. You follow this. This is for power for the alternator. This is the sensor. I think this was the temperature, water temperature sensor. So I left all the original car harness and I bundled it around here, you know, protected this. And this is basically a heater hose, and I split it and then I mounted it. So it all goes down. Everything's protected. The downside of protecting everything in inner duct is, if you don't know the car, yeah, you have to dig for it, but that's why I'm pointing it out to you. Over here, you'll notice there's a black wire here and it says start. There's a junction right here. Okay, this junction is for the original start wire from the key. So when you go to the start position, it energizes this. This wire goes that way towards the passenger side, goes down to the starter relay solenoid, engages it, and it starts it. So if you know, back in the days when you want to hot wire a car, this is where you do it. This is the purple wire, basically, original. It's kind of dirty, you know, so it's dark, it looks black. Okay. The little red wire here is the sense wire for one other item, and I'll cover that in the next go on, because honestly right now I kind of forgot what that was for. I'll have to find that.
Okay.
Is it focused?
Yeah, it's really bright. Okay. Yep.
Okay, the last wire here out of the computer, out of the 4 tiny wires, is rad fan. That is the purple wire with a white stripe, and that is the one that goes this way from the computer, turns the relay on, which we're going to walk over and take a look here again. This was the one earlier, this wire here. We call it fan negative. This is the white purple from the computer, turns this radiator on, the relay. So this first relay is for engine cooling, calling the fan. The one next to it is radiator fan called by the air conditioning unit. So out of this whole modern car setup, there's 4 relays. Radiator 1, or radiator from the computer, for cooling the engine. Second radiator fan called from the air conditioning to cool the AC. Headlight relay, which I added, it's optional, it's really not needed. But the other important relay is over here, back on the passenger side. Initiated signal from the computer to turn the fuel pump on. The fuel pump relay isn't controlled by your key ignition directly. It's indirectly controlled. When you turn your key to the on position, which is this blue wire right here, applies power through a fuse into the ECU. The ECU says, oh, you turned the ignition on. Let me apply the fuel pump relay to energize or prime the fuel pump line one time, first time. And it runs for about 4 seconds and then it goes out. Then when you crank start, it will engage this fuel pump, turn it on. When you let go, as long as the engine is spinning, the relay will continue to be energized by the ECU, which then powers up the fuel pump and provides fuel for the car. So there's 4 total relays for the car. Fuel pump, radiator controlled by the AC, radiator controlled by the ECU for engine cooling, and then the not so essential, well, it is kind of, is a headlight relay.